Team orders are going to start coming into play at Mercedes from this weekend in Austria. Since Lewis Hamilton wiped the floor with the Mercedes drivers in Barcelona, securing his first win with Ferrari, it looks like Toto Wolff has seen the real threat that Ferrari poses on them. And it sounds like he's not going to be taking any chances. Before Barcelona, Kimi Antonelli and George Russell had been going toe-to-toe on track, and the team were just letting them get on with it, probably in hopes that they wouldn't collide with one another. They had a lot of trust in their drivers to race fairly, but that sounds like it's all about to change. I did say about a week or so ago that they're probably going to think about prioritising one of the drivers soon, and if they don't, then they should. And it looks like this might be the beginning of that, or at the very least, it's the beginning of them prioritising a race win over Ferrari rather than them squabbling between themselves. Here's something that you need to pay attention to. Before the Monaco Grand Prix, Kimi Antonelli said that the team were happy for them to race each other freely as long as there's respect, without the need for overly pre-scripted rules. Now this is important to remember because at that point, Russell had just had an engine failure in Canada, which meant that Antonelli had pulled 25 points on him in the standings by going on to win that race. But before the engine failure for Russell, we all saw it, the Mercedes drivers were fully elbows out, and it felt like a collision between them was just seconds away. There were multiple incidents in the Canadian Grand Prix where Kimi brakes too late, or George squeezes him and ends up in the gravel, or taking an escape road. Toto must have been sweating a bit at this point, but they allowed it to continue because there was no clear favourite at this point, so they kinda had to let them race. And the rest of the grid were not really anywhere near them in terms of their outright pace, so there wasn't really any massive threat there, so they could allow their drivers to race. And then, going into Monaco, Toto tells the drivers that you can race as much as you want, fully knowing that Monaco is a track that nobody overtakes on anyway. So that was a safe bet to assume that nothing would happen, even if they did end up next to one another after the start of the race. It was still very unlikely that there would be a collision between them, even if they were racing hard at Monaco. However, in Barcelona, everything changed. They lost to Ferrari, and Hamilton gained 25 points to Kimi in the standings, a huge chink in their armour. Now, Toto knows exactly the kind of threat that Hamilton can be, so he's decided that they need to change their strategy when it comes to their drivers racing one another. Because let's face it, in Barcelona, they allowed Kimi and George to race each other for far too long, and that's what ultimately cost them the race victory. Of course, the safety car timing did help, but I still think that Hamilton would have caught and overtook both of them anyway, because they were just wasting so much time fighting each other. So Toto, rightly so, wants to avoid this happening again. It sounds like the team learned a lot in Canada about what to prioritise, allowing fair racing between your drivers or getting the race win. So here's what Toto has said when he was asked about their driving in Barcelona. "We didn't interfere in them fighting because that's how we've always raced. But it's a situation we need to look into for the future with both drivers. How to handle a situation where there's a pace differential if we're fighting for a victory or at the risk of losing a victory. So basically, we're going to give team orders in the future if there's a clear, faster driver." So that doesn't sound great for George Russell because Kimi is outpacing him quite regularly at the moment. Toto then went on to acknowledge the threat of Lewis Hamilton. If there's anybody that knows what kind of threat Lewis can be, it's Toto. He said, "I'd rather not fight him for a title because I know what he's capable of. If he smells blood, he goes. I've seen it many years where suddenly the Lewis Hamilton train gets started and then it's very difficult to stop it." Achieving 6 Drivers' World titles together, he knows Lewis's ambitious mindset like the back of his hand. And he knows that they need to actually start thinking about how the Mercedes drivers can work together as a team rather than rivals. That way they can make sure that Lewis doesn't get the chance to close the gap to Antonelli in the driver's standings. So going into this weekend's race in Austria, I think that we can expect a little bit of a different attitude when it comes to their drivers going head to head. Because Kimi is obviously the clear favourite now. Even after his retirement in Barcelona, he's still 50 points ahead of George. And like I said, Kimi has had more pace than George in the last few races. And those Ferraris are going to be giving them grief, putting them under pressure. So Mercedes will apparently now be thinking about the bigger picture and prioritising a race win. But does that actually mean what they're making out that it means? Because I'm wondering, are they actually going to be fair with this? For instance, if Antonelli is ahead of Russell and Russell is behind with far more pace, but then they have two Ferraris closely behind them, would Mercedes tell them to swap positions so that George has the chance to win the race, even though Kimi is the championship leader? Because I think I know exactly what they would do if it was the other way around. Or would they tell them to hold position in the hopes that as a unit of two drivers, they can hold the Ferraris off and essentially keep Kimi ahead and building his gap to Hamilton in the standings? I don't know, I think I'm just a bit sceptical of how this is going to actually work. Are the team orders actually going to be fair between Kimi and George if they're going to bring them into play? Because they say that they're going to be prioritising the race win, but is that only when it's favourable to Kimi? Time will tell. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. It really does mean a lot. And if you enjoyed the video, please do hit the like and the subscribe button. It is the best way to support this channel. Thanks.